Should you go to college or flight school first? Let's talk about it. If you're taking those initial steps into pursuing your dreams of becoming a career pilot, one of the decisions you might have to make is whether you want to go to college or flight school first. When we say full-time flight school, we're referring to a flight school that solely concentrates on pilot training. The main difference between the two is that college gives you a bachelor's degree and your pilot certification in as little as 4 years. A full-time flight school can provide you with all your pilot certifications in as little as 5.5 months and take as long as a year or two, but you won't receive a bachelor's degree in that time period. Before diving into what's the best route to take, let's actually talk about why a pilot would pursue a degree in the first place, and there's usually 3 reasons. First, a degree can be used as a backup plan in case flying doesn't work out or in the unfortunate event that you lose your medical qualifications as a pilot. Second, it provides you a competitive edge against other pilots when applying for positions. Lastly, a bachelor's was required by major carriers such as American, United, UPS, FedEx, but as of 2022, that degree requirement no longer exists. That being said, what is the most efficient route for you to become a career pilot if you still want to obtain a degree? Let's dive into it. We will look at both paths over a 10-year time span, one that goes to college first and the other that goes to a full-time flight school first. We will also assume that your end goal is to fly for the airlines. There are 2 additional factors we want to consider: when you would want to receive a college degree and the number of flight hours attained. The flight hours not only represent the number of hours you'll have at a specific point in that timeline, but it can also be indicative of your level of experience as a pilot. Let's start with what those first 10 years will look like if you pursue college first. Now, your first few years will be you pursuing a degree. We want to point out that although a bachelor's degree is supposed to take only 4 years, it takes most people around 6 years according to recent stats. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt though and assume you accomplish it in 4 years. So in that time, you will have received both your associates and your bachelor's. The goal is to attend a college that also has an aviation program. So while you're working on those classes, you're also working towards your pilot certifications and ratings. In that given time, you should receive 7 certificates and ratings similar to our flight school, which should be private, instrument, commercial, CFI, CFII, commercial multi, and MEI. At the end of those 4 years, you should have around 250 hours of flight time once you graduate college. Now, to obtain the ATP certificate, you have to have 1,500 hours, but you're only sitting at 250. So what do? Most become a flight instructor, where you can quickly obtain flight hours while staying sharp with your piloting skills. Although there are other jobs that have a low flight hour requirement, we will assume you chose the flight instructor route. It usually takes anywhere between 1.5 to 2 years to obtain that remaining 1,250 hours to get your ATP certificate. Let's say it takes 2 years, so by the end of year 6, you will have obtained 1,500 hours. It's officially time for you to move on to the regionals. Most pilots will fly with a regional airline anywhere between 4 to 6 years before they move on to a major carrier. Let's say it takes you 4 years. The average pilot at the airlines will average around 75 flight hours per month. If you take that 75 hours, multiply that by 48, which is the number of months in a 4-year time span, you will have accrued around 5,100 flight hours. All right, now we have a good understanding of what your timeline will look like if you chose to go to college first. Let's look at what your timeline would look like if you chose to go to a full-time flight school first. Our program, which we call the Career Pilot Program, is 5.5 months long and is the fastest program in the nation. Let's say it's our program that you choose to enroll in. In that time span, you would have obtained the same 7 certificates and ratings we mentioned earlier, and will have around 200 flight hours when you graduate our program. After graduating from our program, most students instruct with us to build up their flight hours. Our average instructor usually gets to 1,500 flight hours within 1.5 years, but we'll be conservative and let's say it takes you 2 years, which will be achieved halfway on year 3. You're ready to move on to the regionals, and as mentioned before when talking about the average flight hours accrued at the regionals, the average sits around 75 hours, and we're going to say that you'll be at the regionals for at least 4 years. By the middle of year 7, you'll be sitting at 5,100 flight hours. At this point, it's time to move on to the majors. By the end of year 10, you would have around 8,250 flight hours under your belt. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but I don't have my college degree. Check this out. We have a partnership with Purdue Global, where upon graduating our program, you have also earned credits that can be applied to your pursuit of a bachelor's degree. You'll also continue to receive credits as you work your way through the ranks of the aviation industry. Reducing the amount of credits that you have to work towards while trying to obtain a degree will save you both time and money. That being said, you're going to be working full-time as a flight instructor, so you can only go to college part-time. Let's say because of all that, it'll take you 6 years to finish your bachelor's if you start as soon as you graduate flight school. This means by the middle of year 7, you will have obtained your bachelor's degree. So what do we take away from all this? Ultimately, the only benefit of choosing to go to college first is you'll receive your bachelor's degree 3 years earlier compared to you choosing to go to flight school first. But as mentioned before, it's not a requirement for any major carriers in the US anymore. If you think that being in a flight school for 4 years instead of 5.5 months will make you a better pilot because you'll have more experience, we highly recommend you check out our video, Accelerated Flight Schools, Where's the Experience? The pros to going to a full-time flight school clearly outweigh going to a college first, and there's 2 major reasons why. The first is you save money. Because of the credits you receive from Purdue Global for graduating our program, that's time and money saved that would have otherwise been dedicated to those additional classes you would have had to take. Also, it's not just the cost of college tuition you have to consider. You'll also have to consider personal expenses during that 4-year time period, such as food, housing, your phone bill, etc. At most, you can work a part-time job to compensate for some of those expenses, but the majority of those 4 years, you'll be accruing debt and unable to really start paying it off. Joining a program like ours, you're in a paid position as a pilot in as little as 5.5 months, and you can immediately start tackling your school loan. The second thing is you build seniority sooner than later. In the world of aviation, as in most industries, seniority and experience is everything to obtain a higher quality of life, a higher salary, a more flexible schedule, etc. As you can see on this timeline comparison, you're building seniority 3.5 years sooner than if you chose to go to college first, and you will forever be 3.5 years ahead, assuming you don't deal with any unforeseen major delays. You're getting paid as a pilot 3.5 years sooner, you're at the regionals 3.5 years sooner, and you're at the majors 3.5 years sooner. You'll even be thousands of flight hours ahead. By the time you get to the majors, you'll be at 5,100 hours, whereas if you choose to go to college first, you would have just gotten past 1,500 hours. That's a 3,600 hour difference. Comparing where you'll both be at the end of year 10, you would be sitting at 8,250 hours and have been at the majors for at least 3.5 years. Whereas if you chose to go to college first, you would have just started the transition into the majors at only 5,100 hours. We'll even throw in a bonus reason. Going to flight school first is more enjoyable. If your goal is to be a career pilot, it is to be assumed that you have a passion for flying. When you go to a full-time flight school first, you would have spent more time in a plane and experienced more of the aviation industry in that same 10-year time span compared to if you chose to go to college first. We hope this video was informative and brought more clarity on which path to choose from. We want to push a simple reminder that the time that we have in life is limited, so you should dedicate that time to the things that you want to do. If you have a passion for flying and you want to get paid while doing it, dedicate more time to being up there rather than being down here, wishing you would have been flying sooner and more often.